my name is Chlöe Swarbrick. I am your Green MP for Auckland Central, and yeah, just utterly stoked to be amongst our Rainbow MPs. We make up 40% of our Green caucus, so we are therefore the proudest party in Parliament. Yeah, just incredibly stoked with our party and all that we do. Green is, of course, one colour of the rainbow. I can add something just from the perspective of, and I know it crosses over with Ricardo's immigration portfolio as well, but it pertains to kind of sexual health and also tertiary education, and it's something which a constituent, migrant student, brought to me about how the way that you kind of go through the pathway of becoming an international student requires that, because of the really cooked way that we think that international students are going to become strains on our health system, we require them to get private insurance, and that private insurance, because they're a captured audience, will not enable them to also cover their sexual health. For those who are in the queer community, that means for those who may need, for example, PrEP, they're not able to get that funded, which then means that it's hundreds of dollars every few months for them to be able to access that to prevent them from getting HIV/AIDS for participating in the queer community in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So it again is things like that that are totally missed in producing this policy. I'd also add just a fascinating intersection with even the drug law reform portfolio, where last term I was in a really peculiar situation where I was in front of the Minister of Health at that point in time, Dr. David Clark, trying to explain to him what poppers were. And that was when, we were seeing the reclassification of that substance, and just a complete lack of understanding from his officials about how this was utilised. And that's the disconnect between our communities and the lived experience and the stuff which end up on the desk of ministers. So that's the kind of stuff that I'd love to see, particularly in the drug law reform space, the HIV/AIDS pandemic and the intersection there with regard to health policy. There's just so many layers. There's so many layers. A sense or a starting point of kind of abolition of binaries in general. So for me, I think in grappling with kind of queer or rainbow identity, it is about recognition of fact, and much like I think many spaces with kind of neurodivergence as well, and as we grapple with kind of coming to understand far greater kind of the social implications and construct of disability and otherwise, that all of these things that have always been othered effectively just othered by virtue of how we've designed mainstream society, in that we intentionally ostracize people through that kind of process of system design and creation. So I think inherently existing as somebody who is queer and inherently engaging in processes like Pride and claiming that space is trying to break down those walls and those barriers and build those kinds of bridges. So yeah, I think for me it's about understanding and recognizing that your difference is something which isn't, a binary kind of good or bad. It offers a different perspective, and it's therefore kind of as valuable as the other difference that you might see, and you therefore, I think, have a responsibility, particularly as somebody who has an intersection of an identity with that privilege, to continue to open the door and pull in more people into these spaces where more decisions can be made that better reflect all of us. So yeah, that's a very hodgepodge explanation of all of it, but it definitely for me just comes down to our role, or what I see my role as a queer MP is trying to see the queerness in everybody and celebrating that. For me, I think, abolition is about recognising that the systems that we have in place currently are not designed for all of us, and therefore, I think all of us as Greens in particular, and something that, Catherine Dallahunty had to, when I called her kind of in a panic when I first got in and was like, I feel like an alien, she was like, that's a good thing. And I think, if you didn't feel like an alien, particularly as a Green, then maybe you should be checking yourself a bit. The fact that all of us operate inside of the system now that we were once raging against, I think, is a cognitive dissonance that we have to grapple with. But it is the reality that a lot of what we do, and I might actually potentially be borrowing some of Jan's kind of explanations here around harm reduction, We fundamentally do not think that this Westminster colonial system built on kind of such an adversarial model that says literally the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition sitting historically 2 swords length apart, that founded on kind of violence and kind of adversarial nature of somehow we're supposedly going to come up with the best possible solution built on this really kind of old school patriarchal form of violence and power expression is just, totally cooked. And I think that's why all of us in the Greens, our kaupapa is fundamentally and need to recognise those who fought for Te Tiriti o Waitangi to be properly recognised in that charter, which flows through to kind of those values of ecological wisdom, recognition of the fact that resources are finite. If you accept that, the next one, social justice and social responsibility, makes complete sense. Those resources have to be fairly shared in order to have a stable, let alone cohesive society that everybody can participate in. Then you get appropriate decision making where everybody has the opportunity to express themselves. And again, you can continue to grapple with new and novel situations and build new systems and tweak them as appropriate. And non-violence, which I think is another one that is worthy of closer scrutiny, because of course we're hippies, we don't like going to war, but if you look at that a little deeper, it's actually about having those really difficult conversations which otherwise can escalate to the point of aggression, and figuring out how to resolve that with a level of maturity that doesn't come easily. So that's kind of what I think abolition looks like. I think that's the first principles of a system that works as best as possible for all of us, but is so far removed from where we're at now. And that, when you're a kid and you're learning about the world and you're, pointing at different things and you're like, what's that? That's a table. What's that? That's a cup. What's that? That's prison. What's a prison? That's where bad people go. If you do not have interaction with the prison system by virtue of your whānau or your community's interactions with it throughout the rest of your life, that is a rhetoric and a stigma that you will hold forever and not be able to unpack unless somebody challenges you with it and probably tries to help unpack it. And I think that's, again, part of what our role is, to help people understand the narrowness of our perspectives unless we're encountering people with different backgrounds. My name is Chlöe Swarbrick. I am your Green MP for Auckland Central, and just utterly stoked to be amongst our Rainbow MPs. We make up 40% of our Green caucus, so we are therefore the proudest party in Parliament.